Alright, so let's start the lesson. Okay, so today, lesson 5, we're gonna go through the movie method. Alright, so there's a reason we're calling this the movie method. This is something I kind of came up with over time. We'll see what it is. Alright, so first let's talk about plan writing. Right. Okay, so two people, Devon and Isabel, were having dinner at a restaurant. Devon intended to propose to Isabel during dinner. Well, that's why I drink alkaline water. Detoxifies my body and it's great for my complexion. I don't think it works like that, Devon said. What do you mean? I mean, the experts are all saying it, the woman replied. Just because someone has an opinion doesn't make them correct. Whatever, you always think you're right. I'm just trying to have a discussion. Why do you always have to turn it into an argument? Devon said. You, you. Isabel stood up and stormed out of the restaurant. So, what do you guys feel about this like scene? Thoughts? Yes, no. Is it good? Not so good. Those two are not ready for marriage. Doesn't feel grounded. It's too direct. Not enough actions for context. Yeah. Okay. Basically, I think the general idea is that it's not the best writing, and I think this is kind of like the issue that people feel sometimes when you like when you write a story and you feel like why does it feel flat, right? Like it doesn't seem to be having the impact that we want, right? And so the thing is, it's very hard to tell people how to bring a story to life, right? How to bring a scene to life. And so how how do we come up with like a way to turn this into a concept, right? Something that you can start to learn yourself and even teach people, right? Because you don't really understand, right? It's very hard to go by feel, right? Oh, it just feels flat. Okay, so this is where we have the movie method, all right? So it boils down to a very simple concept, all right? Basically, when you have a scene, you describe it the way it would play out in a movie. Okay, so what I mean by that, we'll take a look, alright? But first, okay, I'm gonna give you guys 1 minute, actually 1 minute 40 seconds. You go into the supplementary resources. Again, I'm gonna paste the link in the chat so you guys can take a look. We're looking at movie scene, The Hunger Games 3. Okay, so let's take a watch and see how that goes. So basically, what Theo said, you see, add explosion, turn it into a microwave scene, exactly. Okay, I'm kidding, alright. So, how was the scene like, right? If you're looking at the movie, right, what do you see? Is it like, is it slow pace? Is the music slow and relaxing? It's a lot. Yeah. A lot of things are happening. A lot of things are being thrown at you. There's a lot of fast paced, high intensity action. All the jump cuts are there, right? So let's see how does that play out in writing, right? After that, what little sense of order there unravels as the remaining curlicues of steam intertwine with the snow. Visibility extends just to the end of my barrel. Peacekeeper, rebel, citizen, who knows? Everything that moves is a target. Oh dear, some of the typo. Everything that moves is a target. People shoot reflexively, and I'm no exception. Heart pounding, adrenaline burning through me. Everyone is my enemy, except Gil, my hunting partner, the one person who has my back. There's nothing to do but to move forward, killing whoever comes into our path. Screaming people, bleeding people, dead people everywhere. So what's going on here, right? Like if you look at the writing, right, it uses very short phrases, right? Peacekeeper, rebel, citizens. Everything that moves is a target. People shoot reflexively. I mean, you don't see like, oh, okay, I try to shoot aiming for people, but everyone around me might be peacekeeper or rebel or citizen, and it's hard to clarify. My heart is pounding hard in my chest as adrenaline runs throughout my body, making me like heighten my senses and alertness. Like no, it's just really fast, right? In fact, you're barely getting any sense of the scene, of the environment, right? You don't, the person is not like, the author is not describing like, oh, there's a car in front, I'm running, there's a car, then there's like a brake, right? You just go, just move, run, right? There's no, if the characters have no time to look at what's in front of them, then the reader has no time to read it, right? The reader doesn't even get to see it either, right? What does the character pay attention to, right? What does the camera focus on? It focuses on screaming people, bleeding people, dead people everywhere. It focuses on the shooting, and that's what you want. So if that's what the camera is drawing your attention to, right, in your reading, in your writing, sorry, you draw attention to that, not anything else. So fast pace, high intensity, focus on the crucial things in the scene, right? So big, moving, loud, they're in front of the character or near the character. Don't slow the reader down while reading. Use shorter sentences, simpler structures, and avoid over describing. Does that make sense? Okay. If the reader needs to know the layout of the setting, right? Describe it before the action starts or in an earlier scene, right? So let's say you know that there's like going to be a chase scene happening and they're going to need to run through a certain place, and then before they go to the key area where they're going to defeat the boss in some arena thing, right? If you don't have time to describe the arena or whatever, have them explore it ahead of time, right? Either before the action starts and then they enter and they look around, or maybe in an earlier scene in the story you can visit the area, describe it, and so when the characters eventually have to start running through the setting, you don't have to spend the time like, oh, like as the enemy chases them, they come into this huge hall, there's a stained glass windows everywhere, there's a chandelier, right? If you're gonna drop the chandelier on the final, on the boss, on like the, I don't know, the antagonist, right? Don't describe how the chandelier looks just before you shoot it down. Describe it earlier so that when the time comes, you destroy it in like full blown fast paced action. Another tip would be use powerful words, right? Rather than saying like, oh yeah, he pushed quickly, right? You say swift, forceful, vigorous, fiery. Everything needs to move fast, feel fast. Yeah, think like almost anime scenes. It's anime. I feel like anime scenes would feel, it would like follow how like the cinematography concepts apply across the board, I would say. Yeah. Do we have one more question before I continue? Because I saw a certain lizard typing. If no, we can move on. Okay, yeah. Any questions? We can take questions before we move to the next scene. Okay. No? Let's move on. Alright. So scene 2, I want you guys to go over to scene 2 and then watch what goes in there. Alright. Okay, let's go. Gravity. Movie scene 2, don't watch the wrong thing. Okay, that should be the video. Alright. So how's this scene? What does it feel like? Tense, but it's a different way. Okay. Pressure. Very solemn feeling. Okay. Tense, but this de-escalating. Okay, so she's getting out of danger, right? And she finally reaches the safety of her own ship, right? So her panic subsided as Stone climbed back into the airlock and shut its door. Her breast was still panicked in her spacesuit, but she had to focus. Kicking off the door, she sailed through the chamber and turned the red valve, restoring air back into the chamber with a hiss. Stone shook her head, trying to catch her breath as she floated in the safety of the airlock. A beep indicated that the cabin had been pressurized, and she disengaged the helmet of her suit. Her breath was slowing down, getting deeper and deeper with each inhale. Her gloves went off first, and the rest of the suit followed. The fatigue gradually washed over her as she floated gently in space. Her eyes closed as the silence of the airlock enveloped her, broken only by the sound of her soft breath. Her body curled up like a baby in the womb, letting the comfort of the ship's hull lull her to sleep. The danger was over. She was safe. Yeah, so if you follow, there's kind of no writing novel adaptation of it. So I wrote this scene. But the idea is, this is a slow paced scene, right? You're giving the reader a break from the high intensity scenes that happened earlier, right? And so when we throughout the story or throughout like the scene that I wrote, like, we use very longer phrases, right? You see, her eyes closed as the silence of the airlock enveloped her, right? Like that's a very long phrase compared to the one that we saw in the action scene, right? And in fact, like when I talked about like the baby in the womb, that's actually the imagery that the director was going for, I believe. Like, like you take those baby picture, here's the umbilical cords, right? The baby is like that, right? They were aiming for this very scene. I think this scene they call it rebirth in like the screenplay or something like that. Yeah. So it's quite cool. Yeah. So take your time with the scene, right? The camera is panning slowly across the setting, right? There's no jump cut. In fact, the whole thing was filmed in just like a smooth motion and like one scene, no cuts, right? Describe what you see, right? What's the camera panning over? Who is the camera panning over? What's happening, right? Use words with connotations that reflect the mood. So if it's peaceful, make use words that make me feel peaceful, right? Like, if there's a beeping sound, try not to say alarm, alert, right? Just say indicator, right? So this way, when the reader goes through your story, they're not gonna feel like, oh man, like the alarm sounded softly, right? The word alarm will kind of already come with that like urgent like connotation, right? So try to use words that have more peaceful connotations. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, one question. Okay, we'll wait for the question before we move on. How about the rest? Like, any questions? Any thoughts? Make sense so far? Doesn't make sense? Agree? Disagree? So if the camera is moving slowly, right, you can see what the camera is focusing on, right? If the camera is moving across the room, right, describe the things that the camera would see as you move through the room, right? Right, like in the first scene, you notice like the camera is just focusing on the action. It's very close to the characters. You don't see things from a high level, right? And then like everything is jump cut. You have barely have time to look at anything before you're moving on. So same thing, right? Don't give the reader time to like dwell on the scene. Move them through quickly, right? Likewise over here, it almost right like I can describe to you what happens. The lady comes in, like closes the door, takes off her suit. That's basically what happens, right? But like, you know, the the director, like the movie director, is taking the time to slow you down, right? And to let her slowly take off her suit. And like, you feel everything calm down, right? And that's like the intention of the scene, right? So in the same way, when you write this scene out, you want to slow the readers down as well. You take the time to describe the scene to get to communicate the mood of it. Yeah. Okay, one more question. Okay. While you're typing the question, let's move on to the next scene first. Okay, wait, hang on. What struck you the most is left out of the writing in scene. We don't need all the information, so the scene focuses on specific things to slow you down. Yeah. So don't over describe in the scene. So we covered this in some of the earlier lessons. You not everything needs to be conveyed, right? Remember, like we talked about the door, right? It's okay if there's a door and someone imagines like a wooden door that's painted blue. Someone imagine a wooden door that's painted red, right? It's fine. If it's a bit different, it's okay, right? Not everyone needs to have the same image that the author is having, because otherwise, if you try to describe everything, there's just no way, right? Just focus on the crucial part, the ones that convey the story, convey the mood. Yeah. All right. Let's move to the third scene. All right. So there's lesson 5, movie scene 3. Okay. All right. Let's go. All right. So how's the scene? What do you guys think the point of that scene was? Showing the wondrous hidden world of the wizarding world. It feels like an introduction to the new phase, to a new phase of the wizarding world. Okay. Huge battle. Wow, few characters went across. If memory serves, it's the first time Harry's been in the Ministry. Exposition. Okay, so you guys kind of got it. It's basically like Harry Potter. Not sure if this is the first time, but this is definitely new. So that's why you notice there's a lot of exposition. It's not like the story is moving forward, right? No characters are exposing anything new. There's no action happening. But they're really just getting from one place to the other, right? But it's really just to show you this is what the world is, right? Here's everything. So let's look at the camera, right? At the start, the camera focuses on kind of like a overhead shot, right? And slowly panning across. So what are you focusing on, right? You're focusing on the bustling wizards, you're focusing on the giant pillars around them, right? Imagine if the camera was following Harry Potter as we went, right? Harry Potter's here. Imagine the camera is following, right? Oh, then how will you describe? You describe like, oh, the crowds are bustling, pushing him back and forth. He can barely see over the heads of people, taller people, right? But that's not what we're doing here. The camera is purposely showing you the entire scene, right? And so what do you see, right? You can look at the wizards as a crowd. You can look at the giant pillars, right? There's a kind of like, is this knee level? Okay, anyway, it's a shot that focuses on the characters, right? So now you can like focus more on what they're doing, right? Harry and Arthur walk down the corridor, right? I'm not gonna write it in full story, but you just to get a feel of like the beats that we are going through, right? There's like a fireplace, right? The camera takes the time to show you the fireplace, right? If this is like the second, third, or fourth time they're coming through, you won't see this, right? They won't be paying attention. The reason why they're showing you now is because this is exposition, right? They're showing like the wizards materializing out of the green flames of the flu network. Flu, FLOO, not FULU. Yeah. This is intentional, right? The camera purposely focused on it. Why? Because this is interesting. This is part of the lore. And so they're gonna show it to you, right? There's a poster, Dumbledore, Daft or Dangerous, right? So this is more lore. Why? Because this is where the ministry is starting to rebel against Dumbledore, and they're starting to say like, you know what? He thinks Voldemort is coming back. He's mad. He's a dangerous person. Be careful of what he says, right? And then he moves to a overhead shot of the scene, right? And where it starts to talk about like the vast room, there's like golden statues. There's like overlooking rooms. What? Yeah. See, then there's like a low angle shot of the banner. Low angle, right? the point of low angle is because it when you low angle from something, so this is kind of like stuff you learn when you do cinematography, is where it puts someone in a position of power, right? If you're viewing from top down, right, you're viewing them kind of as lesser, and when you're viewing from below up, right, it makes this seem imposing, right? And this is the Cornelius Fudge, right? That's like the governor or something, like the minister of magic, right? And so they present him as someone in a position of power, right? And so his figure is imposing, right? This is how you can create the mood, right? And then now you focus on the elevators. They come to the elevator lobby, enter one of the numerous cabins, and then they go in. In fact, Arthur even like looks at the notes that are flying in the elevator, and he's just like, oh yeah, we used to have owls, right? And then the owls made a mess everywhere, right? Like, because a lot of like owl poop to clear. Yeah, and that's the kind of exposition that they're doing here, right? So they're introducing a setting, right? There are many different camera angles you can use, right? Think about how you as a writer will introduce your scene, right? Are you panning over the scene, right? Are you viewing details at the ground level? And what are the details that you focus on, right? Introduce sights and sounds, but don't turn it into exposition, right? If the aspects of the scene that require explanation, let the reader use context, have another character introduce information, or use any other plot device you can think of, right? So you notice, right? Imagine in writing, right? You show this Cornelius Fudge, and then you start going, oh, by the way, Cornelius Fudge is the current minister of magic, who stepped up recently, and he doesn't like Dumbledore now, which is why you have the newspaper Daily Prophet saying Dumbledore is dangerous, and like, relax, right? That's not what the camera is doing, right? So you don't have to do it now, right? In fact, we can just look at this and infer from the rest of the story, right? We can look at this and we might not know that he's the Minister of Magic, right? But we do know that he's someone in power, that he's a powerful and important person, and that he's gonna show up later in the story. You see, that's why they show it to you, and it's okay. You don't have to go into full exposition, right? And in fact, when they're talking about like the notes flying, I'm not sure if you notice again, like Arthur is like, oh yeah, by the way, we used to have owls, right? These are notes between the departments, right? That's exposition. Use another character to introduce the information, right? Yeah. One more thing you'll notice, they introduce this scene. I believe, if I'm not wrong, this is the movie where they have a fight scene here later on in the story towards the climax. And that's the point, right? You introduce this here now, right? So that you can have the fight there later. You watched the wrong one. Oh dear. Oh no. Okay, you can watch again later. Okay, but yes, in fact, you when you later see the if you watch the movie, they go through the Ministry of Magic, right? They sneak in, right? They walk in a certain way, and then when they encounter the Death Eaters, while they are running out, they go through they revisit the places that you already see. So you already get the description of the area. And so when they start to run through it and fight, right? Like J.K. Rowling is not spending time to describe the scene again because she has already described it to you already. Yeah. So it's just another one of those techniques that you can use. It's very subtle, right? And you won't even know. But as a reader, it will just flow so well, right? And in fact, that's kind of like the writer's job. Like, if the reader feels like they have to slow down and wait, okay, he's running from the left. Which door is that? Oh, that's towards the exit, or is that like deeper into the area? Like, oh, I don't remember, right? That's when you have not done a good job, right? Whereas if as a as a reader you don't feel like you're getting stuck anywhere, that means the writer has done an amazing job at setting up the scene for you. All right. Any questions? No questions so far. Okay. How about the rest? So the other character has to give context for what's coming next. Yes and no. Not everything has to be explained. It can be explained later on, right? Um, like certain, like sometimes people can just come in and just like, okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense, right? Like you, so long as you give it, you tell them. In fact, it can some of the information you can tell them later down the line, right? Like I mean, if you think about how, in fact, since we're on the topic of Harry Potter, like Harry Potter didn't say, by the way, there are wizards and magic. No, it starts with Harry. Harry is new. Harry thinks he's a normal person. Suddenly, Hagrid appears and says, "You're a wizard." Right? He doesn't say you're a wizard. There's Hogwarts. Right? There's a whole army of wizards that you have no clue about. Oh, by the way, Voldemort killed your parents. Right? That's not what they do. Right? He just says, "You're a wizard." Right? That's all you need to know. And as a reader, that's all you need to know. Right? You can ask the questions later. Right? You can find out what Hogwarts is later. How are you gonna get there later? It's fine. You will find out. Right? But you don't have to tell the reader that now. Right? You just have to get them through the story. Right? Rather than tell the reader about the world in a stagnant way, have the world interact with itself to show. Yeah, basically, right? Yeah, another important thing to do with world building. Okay, so this will be covered in the world building lesson. But basically, if the main character, if the protagonist knows what it is, right, he won't be thinking about it, right? So Harry is here for the first time, and so the camera follows the way he looks around. In fact, if you see throughout the video, he's looking around because he is new, right? Arthur doesn't care. You look at the other wizards, they don't care either because they come here every day, right? If you were to describe the story from their perspective, the camera would move very differently. The story would move very differently. The story would just go, I'm back at work. I don't want to be here. Screw the crowd. Everyone's hustling around me. The guy, like with the news, he's very loud in my ear, but I take the newspaper anyway and I flip through it while I on my way to the office, and then suddenly I'm at the office. Right? That's how the story will go. Why? Because he doesn't think about the scene the way someone new to this scene will think. Right? And so the way the camera will follow him is different. Right? Like, can you imagine you walk, like a character walks into an office, right? And then we introduce it in the same way. The camera pans over the desk, it pans over the photocopy machine and shows a guy making stacks of notes, right? It zooms in on someone's like documents and proposals for procurement of additional office supplies, and then it zooms into their computer desk. That would be some great satire. Yeah, that's the thing, right? When you are going through the perspective of someone who's familiar with the scene, the camera moves differently. Your descriptions would differ, right? But here you're doing world building. You're introducing something that's new to the main character. You're introducing something that's new to the reader, right? So in some sense, Harry Potter, because he's new to this, he looks around, and so the camera follows where he's looking at, right? And so now the reader also has to follow where he's looking at, right? Again, if you are following a different character who knows what this scene is about, you shouldn't be telling the reader everything either, because the camera will not follow the scene. Does that make sense? You can try if you want, and like Monroe is saying, that would be great satire. Yeah, it will be very funny. I mean, this is what happens when you break the rules, right? You can break the rules. Just make sure when you break them intentionally, right? You don't break them because you're ignorant, and then you, in the end, you get a different effect than what you intended for the story. If you're following a character that's there a lot, you could describe things that are different. Correct. Yes, you can describe what's different. You can describe what stands out to them, right? Um, Another way. another way that people do, I think if you read Lord of the Rings, that's a technique that Logan uses as well. Am I pronouncing his name right? Basically, if you are exploring a new scene, have a newcomer be there, right? So rather than having everyone there know what they're doing, have a newcomer who's gonna be like, what's this? What's that? Or like, they do something that's against the customs, and then the friend has to be like, no, 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 sorry, sorry, don't do that. Right? That's offensive. Right? And then that's the way that you can introduce the scene or the new space to the person, right? We will go through this in world building. Yes. But for now, movie method, follow the camera. Make sense? Okay. So how do we break down a scene, right? So step one, we try to understand the scene, right? You need to know what the scene is about. You need to, are you introducing a new setting, a new character? Are you advancing the plot? Right? What's the mood supposed to be? What information needs to be revealed, right? What are the key events, key locations, key anything, right? So let's try breaking it down, right? The scene from earlier, the couple in the restaurant and they're breaking up, right? So let's introduce the scene, right? Or what we're doing is we're introducing the scene, we're introducing the characters, right? Because we saw the scene for the first time, we're seeing the characters for the first time. They're having a dialogue, right? And then there's the intention to propose, right? So it's not just exposition, here are the characters, here's the location, right? There is a plot element, right? And there's an intent, which is he wants to propose, but it's gonna go badly, right? And that's kind of how it adds. Like it creates tension or the spice in the scene. We also have another lesson on tension. Ooh. Okay. So introducing the scene, right? Let's visualize it, right? You are at the camera now. You will need to know what you want to pay attention to, right? It's a posh restaurant. Let's give it a Victorian style decor, right? And so we'll be doing a pan of the scene, right? Maybe we can start, like those movies that you can imagine already. It starts showing the chandelier, and then it slowly pans down, and then you start to see like the furniture around, everything is golden, the waiters are in tuxedos, there's fancy table spreads. Then after that it zooms in to the corner where there's like a pianist in the like playing music at the piano, right? That's what we could do, right? Make sense? Okay, we need to introduce the characters. We have Devon, right? So he's a wealthy man, right? He cares about his image and reputation. He prides himself for sticking to the facts. How will we get the actor to look like that? Right? Maybe he has tuxedo, he has slick back hair, expensive watch, right? Probably a branded tuxedo as well, not some cheap $100 one. Probably spend like 3,000 tailor made, something like that, right? Probably speaks in a direct and curt manner, right? And then Isabel is gonna be simple minded. She has a taste for high fashion and posh culture, right? Bright blue attention seeking dress with glittery earrings. Let's go. And she probably buys a lot of pseudoscience products such as alkali water, which she and Devon fight over during dinner. Let's go. Okay, I'll answer your question in a bit. Alright. So the dialogue, right? So now the camera's gonna pan over to them and they're gonna start talking, right? And so they start out friendly, the tension escalates, right? So in the movie, the camera will be going back and forth between them, right? And as the conversation escalates, it will go closer and closer towards their expression. Why? Because you are trying to bring the reader closer to what the characters are feeling, right? And you are gonna focus more on their emotion and body language, right? Earlier on when we're introducing, the camera would be further back. It will be looking at their clothes, right? And their appearance, right? See? But then as you get closer and closer into the conversation, you stop focusing on what they're wearing and you start focusing on their expressions, their 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 demeanor, body language. Okay? And in the end, Isabel storms out of the restaurant, right? So Devon gets out to follow her, but stops. Then he takes out the proposal ring in his box and looks at it, right? So maybe like the movie will be like close, you'll show her walking away, But since we are looking at Devon's perspective, right, the camera won't follow Isabel. We will just stay with Devon, right? So it would be weird if we are trying to show Isabel go outside, go to the road, flag a taxi, get in and follow through, and then we cut back to Devon, and then we cut back to Isabel. Like, no, we follow Devon because Devon's our protagonist, right? So movie, like you think about the camera, there's a close-up shot of how nice the ring looks, right? He then throws it to the ground, steps on it, and then sits down, right? So see, so this we can use this, right? This mental model of how the scene would play in a movie, and let's start writing. All right. The waterfront restaurant was busy that night, but yet the guests only spoke in lower, refined voices. Muted wallpaper and tasteful art adorned the walls, illuminated by the crystal chandelier mounted on the high ceiling. The tables were dressed in crisp white linen, each laid with shiny silverware. You see, like the camera is like looking at the scene and then slowly zooming in on the tables. Guests were in their evening outfits, suits and dresses with a casual yet elegant touch. Waiters in tuxedo catered to them with their smooth voices. At the table sat Devon and Isabel. See, so now the camera's moving towards the characters, right? Devon was a handsome man with chiseled features. His brown hair was styled in neat curls, not a strand out of place. He was dressed in his favorite suit, a navy blue blazer, matching pants, and a white undershirt. A silver tie hung from his neck with a neat knot. Opposite him sat Isabel. See, so now the camera pans, like shows her as well. A lovely lady with long flowing hair that reached her shoulders. She was dressed in a stunning black dress that embraced her slender form. A silver scarf was wrapped around her shoulders, complementing the shiny black material. Well, I realized like there's typos here. Complementing also, and she was dressed. I was sleepy when I wrote this. Diamond earrings dangled from her ear, eye-catching yet far from tacky. An alkaline water for me, please, she told the waiter. You see, so now we're gonna flow into the story. He's not gonna come out of nowhere, right? The waiter's gonna ask her for water and like alkaline water. Very good, madam. And is that all? Devon and Isabel nodded and the waiter took his leave. Devon leaned forward with a smirk. You know they don't do anything, right? Oh, you mean the alkaline water? She scoffed. Of course they do. It detoxifies the body. Clears up my complexion too. In fact, before I started drinking. Sounds like pseudoscience if you ask me. Isabel picked up the wine glass on the table, gave it a gentle swirl and took a sip. You'd change your mind if you saw what the experts are saying. Experts? Devon scoffed. Just because they can write an article based on unreliable evidence doesn't make them right. Isabel put the glass on the table, albeit a bit rougher than was called for. Well, it works. You don't know what you're talking about. So what's in your stomach? Huh? Like, how do you digest food? Stomach acid, I guess? Uh-huh. So the acid is going to neutralize the alkali the moment it comes into contact with it. Isabel rolled her eyes. Whatever. You're not even going to listen to me anyway. You always think you're right. Around them, the guests were turning heads to observe the source of the commotion. You know, like in those scenes when characters like start talking loudly or start doing something awkward, you start to cut to all the other characters around us turning their heads to look. Right? This is what's happening here. Right? Waiters did their best not to look. I'm not saying I'm always right, but in this case, I am. You're impossible. I can't even have a conversation with you. I'm trying to have a discussion. Why do you always have to turn it into an argument? You, Isabel pressed against the table, pushed her chair back, and stood up. The glasses of wine on the table spilled over, staining the white fabric a deep crimson. Her face was flustered as she looked around her. At least 50 curious pairs of eyes stared back. I'm done. She threw her hands down and stormed out of the restaurant. Devon got up but stopped himself. There was no point in chasing after her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside it was a golden ring, glistening with emerald, ruby, and diamonds. You see, so we are zooming in on the ring now. He would have popped the question within the hour if only she hasn't been so stubborn about her stupid pseudoscience nonsense. Right? So now you can imagine he's like frowning, he's angry. Or maybe if he had just let it go, then it wouldn't have escalated. Or maybe he slumped back down to his plush ornate chair and sighed. Okay. So how did that feel? How did it compare to the first story? Okay, to answer the question, would this be good in establishing a dichotomy between rich and poor? I mean, it depends if that's the intention of your story. then you need to look, right? But for now, this is just a scene that's happening. There is no politics about rich or poor, right? There is a scene, there is a mood, and by trying to follow where the camera is looking at, we try to get the scene out. Honestly, much better. Can't say how exactly, but it does add a lot of more substance. This is why I call it the movie method, right? You think about it like a movie. Can you imagine it like a movie? Because if you cannot imagine it happening, right, how will your readers do the same, right? This has more image than the first, yeah. Far more detailed, gave more depth to the characters and the scene. Adds a bit of the background, but still focus in one area. What do you mean by one area, right? At the start, we did focus, right? We focus on the scene, right? And this is how the camera works. It shows you from afar before closing in on the characters. It flowed smoothly up to the last part. It went from omniscient third perspective to a more limited personal third. Yeah, it did change a bit. I was trying to get the feel where I was trying to get the feel where the camera is slowly closing in on his expression. So you are really just looking into his mind, seeing the frustration in his eyes, and just like, like, he's conflicted, right? Like, she's been stubborn, but at the same time, maybe he should have just let it slide, right? What should he have done, right? Just like, damn it. Yeah. It still floats smoothly regardless. We can imagine his thoughts like the close up on him and his brain. Yeah. He can do better than someone who overpays for alkaline water. Oh boy. Yeah. Okay, so any questions, right? Does this sound useful to you? Do you feel like this is something you can use in your writing? This is gonna take a bit to understand. Which is why we have the take home exercise. You think it'll help a lot since you think about writing scenes like movie scenes. Yes, that's good. Do you ramp up that particular scene by having the waiter come out with alkaline water? Sure. I mean, if it's a comedy sketch, you can definitely do that. It's like your alkaline water, sir, puts it in front of him, and he's just like, "What the heck?" Slaps it down onto the floor, smash, and then you play the audience laugh track. I mean, you can do that if it fits the scene, right? Again, right? What's the genre, right? If it's comedy, sure. If it's romance, high stakes, right? This is the breakup scene, then sure, you probably don't want that, right? You imagine these scenes in your head like it's from a show or movie, but you never get around to writing them. Yeah, you should, right? Okay, so let's move on to the take home exercise, alright? So we will practice the movie method for a scene. So first exercise, we will take a scene from a movie and adapt it into a story. Right? For the second exercise, we plan the scene from scratch and you write it out with the movie method. Hang on. There we go. So if we take a look at the movie method, the exercise, right? I put in a bunch of scenes, right? A lot of it are like I put down there kind of like the vibe that the scene is going for, right? So you just pick one and like depict it below, right? You feel free to start and stop earlier or later than you need. You don't have to specifically write, like play for play everything, right? But feel free to try. Some of them are like the really sad ones, like I put the up one, the scene where the introduction to up. Holy crap, this will be a challenge to write. Some of these are the really emotional ones. High tension ones are gonna be hard. But if you want to challenge yourself, I recommend, right? Some of them are gonna be interesting, some of them epic, dramatic, romance, whatever, right? Figure out what you wanna write. Um, then we depict it. The other one you really just doing from scratch. I do have some scene prompts where you can choose like action, tension, or slow pace. Again, if this is not interesting to you, feel free to come up with your own scene, and then figure out what is the camera gonna see in the scene, right? Kind of do the breakdown that we did earlier for that story, and then depict it. Okay, any questions for this exercise? I should have a questions page here as well. Any questions? Yeah. You got the gist? Alright. Yeah, I think you guys will get a feel of it when you start writing. Don't worry if you don't get this immediately, because like again, the difference between the first version of the story and the second one is like, it I think the difference is super obvious, right? And that's the thing, right? It's very hard to jump from like a if you are a writer who's used to writing like the first kind, the first version of the story, right? It's very hard for me to give you the knowledge in 1 hour to magically start writing like in the second way instantly, right? I don't think it's possible, and I think that would require a bit of practice, right? Which is why there's the exercise, right? You guys will be experimenting, you guys will be figuring out how to do your own take on it, right? I think once I teach you, the way you implement the lesson will be slightly different, right? Because we all have different ideas of how like cinematography will work, right? You got it. Just gotta decide if you want to do one of the scenes or pick another one you really like. Do it. Just watch the scenes if you want, right? If you have a movie in mind that you really wanna do as well, feel free to go for it. I don't think there's any issue with picking something different, right? I think the important thing is that you challenge yourself. In fact, if you wanna do more than one, right? If you want to do more than one, practice, right? The more the merrier. The only reason I'm asking you to do one, right, is because I don't want like to put in all okay, every single one you have to describe everything, right? I don't want people to be overwhelmed. So I'm just gonna ask you to do one. But if you feel up for doing even more, right? I would say push yourself, right? Go try something new, learn something new. I think that's the best way to learn. Right. Because no, I don't think anyone teaching writing will say, yeah, just write one. Just write one. Okay. Once you write a second or third one, it wouldn't matter. It doesn't count. Right. All writing is good practice. Okay. Any other questions? No, you guys are good. Alright. I think if that's it, we will end off the lesson for today. Thanks so much, you guys, for coming. Welcome back from the break. And for those that kind of came in halfway, I will do my best to upload this soon. And then we will see you guys next week. All right. Bye bye.